Now let me transition a little bit here, talking how this relates to the physical readings that Casey gave, particularly with regard to osteopathy and electrotherapy. In this particular reading, 849-27, he says, hence we would add those influences that are the lowest form of electrical vibration that will carry with same the elements which in their final analysis are the basis of the association or connection with mentality, consciousness, and matter in activity, that is, gold and silver. Okay? He's literally saying there's something about gold and silver operating through these centers which allows consciousness, which allows the soul to manifest. And when that's not present, the soul is going to have trouble connecting into the physical body. And that's exactly what we find in cases of mental illness and neurological disorders. Over and over, he would recommend gold and silver in these vibratory solutions therapeutically to help reconnect this body-soul connection, to help the soul to manifest in the physical body. One further example of that, he talks about chloride of gold, which will aid in assisting the nerve forces through their activities to take from the glandular reaction. So we've got the nerves and the glands, the energies necessary for resuscitating of the nerve impulse itself. Over and over, we see that hundreds of readings recommending this for regenerating the nervous system. He said you could actually rebuild the brain in some cases using this technology with these centers in the body. Okay, so how does that relate therapeutically? First of all, Edgar Cayce frequently recommended osteopathy as a preferred treatment. In about half of his 9,000 plus physical readings, he recommended osteopathy. Why did he recommend osteopathy? Well, there are several reasons, but one of the reasons is that they recognized the concept of centers. If you go back and look at the old osteopathic manuals over and over, you find a whole section or a whole chapter just on the concept of centers, that there are these centers in the body. They wouldn't necessarily talk about the soul connecting there, but they recognize the centers, and they recognize that you needed to therapeutically address those centers. And so here we have something, this was a real, very much impressed me when I stumbled across this illustration from the work of Irvin Corr, who is the premier osteopathic researcher, a physiologist. And in one of his articles, he had drawn out this schematic of the spine and those sympathetic ganglia, the chain ganglia that come along in either side of the spine that I've been referring to. And notice he circled some of those ganglia. And what that meant was, he said, where we've drawn the circles, people tend to have enlarged or fused ganglia right there. And what struck me was, in reading many of the Cayce Health readings, those are the exact same locations where he told the osteopaths to coordinate those centers. Those are the centers where he says the soul force manifests or connects to the physical body. Those are the centers where he said to do the laying on of hands. Those were the centers where he said attach the wet cell, more often than not, at those centers. So that connection with traditional osteopathy was right there in that illustration. Now, some of you have heard of the wet cell battery. Basically, it's just a chemical battery, and it produces a very minute amount of electricity, which just happens to match up with the physical body. And in the use of this, we have a solution jar where the gold and the silver, those elements and so forth that I was talking about, that's located there. And we have a small copper plate and a large nickel electrode. And the copper and the nickel electrodes are attached to the body. Guess where they are attached? 4th lumbar, 9th dorsal, 3rd cervical, more often than not. There are other centers, of course, but these are the primary centers. Can you see why that might be the case? We're working with this low form of electrical vibration, and we're tapping right into this pineal system, this soul connection to the body. And if we can have the next illustration there. This is about as clear explanation from the Cayce material as I can find. This is a male, 8 years old, been deaf for a number of years, reading 3676-1. He said, the small plate, that's a small copper plate with the wet cell, would be attached to 3 different centers alternately. The appliance would be used for 30 minutes each day, one day attaching the small plate to the 3rd cervical, the next day to the 9th dorsal, and the next day to the 4th lumbar. Be sure to rotate the attachments in this order. These are the 3 centers through which there is the activity of the Kundalini forces that act as suggestions to the spiritual forces for distribution through the 7 centers of the body. So there you have the philosophy, the principle of using this wet cell. It taps into this life force system, the soul's connection to the body, through the glands, through the nerves, and that's how the energy works.